What up, heavy mommies, and welcome to another episode of the Cosmic Perspective podcast. And I've been really feeling inspired lately. I've been doing a lot of creative stuff on the side. Honestly, I've been doing a lot of stuff here and there. Some of which I'll release to you guys. Some of which I won't. But regardless, it's all part of the process. And that's something that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about where I am at in my creative journey, and what kind of mental space that I have gotten to and what I have gotten through. Because I think it's important to talk about the entirety and the totality of a journey, especially an artistic journey, which often is something that is of sacrifice, that often comes with lots of doubts, lots of second guessing, lots of being unsure and uncertain about where you are going to go next. And one of the things that I've really been learning lately is, honestly, the perseverance is to get through the part where I'm doubting, to get through the part where I'm not doing stuff, to just literally sit down, make myself do it, and feeling better afterwards having done it. Because for me, the hardest part is starting something. Once I get going, I get very excited. I also lose momentum when I'm working on stuff. And so sometimes I'll start something and I'll get really hyped about it. And then as I'm doing it, like, the reality sets in that, like, this isn't going to be as good as I wanted it to be. And then I'll drop it. And I do that a little too often, honestly. And it's something that I'm working on. But that is part of the process of starting, which is actually starting again. You know, sometimes you do have to take a break from a project. And when you come back to it, then you need to come back and you need to have that same fresh perspective you had when you first started the idea. Because any idea, no matter how good it is, can get old over time the more you ruminate over it, the more you think about it, the more you overthink it. And as someone who is a chronic overthinker, who suffers from anxiety, who also suffers from self-consciousness and needing to... I need acceptance, right? Like, I think we all as human beings need acceptance. But in my process of artistry specifically, I think even more so than other aspects of my life, but I'm sure it's in other aspects too. I have this desire to want to be accepted and respected, which is funny because, funny enough, I feel like the people who are most respected are the ones who are the least concerned with that respect. But it is something that, like, it comes from a place of wanting to take pride in your work, as well as a place of maybe a lack of acceptance as a child, which for me, I was bullied as a kid. So I'm sure that had a significant impact on my desire to want to be liked. And it's probably a fear-based thing of wanting to avoid the traumas that I went through as a child when I was bullied and picked on, and the way that hurt me on an emotional level. And so when I'm creating content, there's an aspect of that it's like, I don't want to be bullied for what I'm making. And I get it. Like, you put shit on the internet, dude, you are open for criticism, man. People can say whatever they want and they're entitled to their opinion. Now, do I think it's a waste of your time to shit on someone you don't like? Yes, I do. I think it's a waste of your time. I think the only time it's ever worth criticizing somebody's work is if it's, like, actually problematic and they need to be informed in the ways that it is problematic. That doesn't mean cancel them, but it means, like, if somebody does something that's a little fucked up and maybe they're just not aware of how fucked up it is because of their background, their privilege, their perspective, whatever, then I think, yeah, by all means, criticize them, let them know, and call them out for it. But if it's genuinely something you just don't like, bro, just don't comment. Just, you could even dislike the fucking video. Okay, dislike it and then leave. Like, it's literally not worth your energy putting negative energy into the world. There's enough of it out there. We definitely don't need it unnecessarily. Especially if something's not your cup of tea. It's like, okay, it's not your cup of tea. Don't watch it. Move along, The desire to hate on things is such a weird thing that I both don't understand and I understand it. Because there is some aspect of that, right? That bitter... oh, how come they have this and I should have this, And that is, like, that's a fucking toxic way of looking at it. But that is something that is very prevalent in our culture and just amongst people in general. So I can see where that happens and I understand the human element. But to me, it seems like such a waste of your energy, time, and attention to go out of your way to hate on something. And that being said, like, no one comments on my shit, so I don't really have haters, honestly, but they're still in this, like, back of my mind when I'm making something, that if I get no engagement, I view that as a failure, which I shouldn't. But, it might just be that it just, the algorithm just didn't favor the video, whatever. But I take it as a failure sometimes, where I'm like, I make something and I feel like people don't like it. People must not like what I'm doing. They're ignoring it. People skipping through my stories on Instagram, whatever, but I skip through people's stories. So it's a weird thing that I over obsess over when I'm making content. I think it's because I have a desire to want it to succeed. And so I have a vested interest in wanting to see some sort of progress. I don't need it to blow up overnight or anything. I just want some indication of progression. And I think in the artistic journey and in the struggle that we go through when we do this stuff, I think Bo Burnham nailed it perfectly in his Inside special. Because to me, Inside was not about the quarantine. I think it was all about the artistic process and what it's like in today's day and age to put things out onto the internet as a content creator, as an artist, and to almost like overanalyze yourself in the process of making it, trying to counter criticisms that you think that you might come up against in the inevitability of you posting and the reception that might happen from people who disagree with your worldview or your point of view. And all of those things, I think, are really salient points that really resonated with me as an artist and really resonated with me as a YouTuber, content creator, podcaster, whatever, whatever title you want to throw at me, depending on how you know me. Those things are created very similarly in the way that Bo Burnham's special portrayed his behind the scenes of making his special. And I thought it was so just like good. Just as a piece of content, I just thought it was so good. And I thought it really made me think about my process and how to go about it moving forward, and what things to consider and what things to maybe stop considering and stop putting too much attention to. And I feel like I'm at the point in my journey now where I feel a lot more confident to just start making some stuff. And if I release it, or if I release it, if I don't, I don't. But as long as I'm learning from the process and I'm getting a little bit better, I'm trying to get over my perfectionism and just make something, make it as good as I can make it, learn the lessons I needed to learn from that project, dump it, move on. So whether dump it means post it and accept the reception of it, or just simply scrap it and just chalk it up as a lesson learned. Trying to be more at peace with that and trying to be more accepting of the reality that sometimes I'm going to put in time into a project that ultimately ends up not being worth it. That is something that I have to be more comfortable with, and being more comfortable with that failure, which allows me to grow and evolve and come up with new ideas. Because if you always spend your time thinking about the thing and overthinking about how you need to create it, what you need to do to prepare for it, how you need to do to get it perfect, you spend zero time doing the thing. And when you actually do the things, you spend that time making it, you learn shit you can't learn in the theoretical world where you're hypothetically thinking about how you might go about doing something. When you actually do something, you are forced to reconcile the realities of what the project is, what is feasible, and you learn what is within the limits of your skills, what is outside of your skill set, what you need to learn in order to enhance or to improve the next phase. You get to make an entire thing, see it as a whole, and figure out which parts of it do you think you can improve on. And then in that process, you do these, it's like iterative work, right? You want to do these different iterations, where each time maybe you just improve one aspect of a video. So maybe the first video I make, the audio sounds really good, but the lighting is kind of weird or something. Okay, well, so then the next thing I should improve is the lighting, right? Okay, now I got the audio and I got the lighting and it looks good. Okay, what is the next thing? Well, maybe the story wasn't that good, you know? Okay, so then maybe we improve the story. Okay, so we do the story, the audio looks good, the lighting looks good. Okay, now now maybe let's add some more After Effects, or let's have better graphics and stuff like that. Okay, well, now that's something new to learn, and that's a new rabbit hole to dive down. And so over time, I can figure out, well, what do I want to put my time and energy into? What is worth outsourcing? What is something that, you know what, I know somebody who is better at doing this. It's better to pay them or have them collaborate on a project, and to learn those things and to just kind of evolve from them. And so where I'm at now in my journey is very much actually allowing myself to just experiment and just shoot shit and just see what comes of it, and accepting the reality of whatever happens and comes from it. And it's been really freeing and liberating, and it's allowed me to very spontaneously sit down and do these things. I mean, this podcast I literally decided to do like a few minutes ago. Well, I guess it's been longer than a few minutes of recording time now, but you know, right before shooting this, I kind of decided, I was like, you know what, I think I'm gonna record a podcast. And guess what? I didn't even fucking plan this, dude. I didn't plan a single thing. I didn't even create a note. Usually I'll create a note with like vague topics I want to cover. I didn't even create a note for this podcast. This is literally just kind of inspiration that I was feeling in the moment, and trying to not rely on needing the inspiration to come up. Like, I don't need the inspiration to come up. By sitting down and being disciplined, and this is something that you learn in the War of Art, and turning pro and all that, is that the act of sitting down forces inspiration eventually. It's not every session, but you know, each time you sit down, you are giving yourself a chance for that inspiration to come. And sometimes you get inspiration and it just comes, and you're not even sitting down and practicing, and you actually stop whatever you're doing and you get into it. And that's great. I love those. When I go on walks, sometimes in the shower, you know, the shower thoughts kind of thing, my mind is allowed to free and go to places and wander. And that is something that we've kind of lost in this technological age. We've lost the ability to let our mind wander, because boredom is no longer an option. If you're bored, you can always entertain yourself. You literally have in your pocket a thing that can tell you everything. Anything in human knowledge, anything that we know or think we know, or disinformation, even as we've seen with Facebook and, you know, right-wingers and shit. All of those things are at our fingertips at all times. Hulu, Netflix, whatever. You can watch it on your phone. And so instead of being bored and allowing yourself to be creative and to use that boredom to come up with something interesting to do, or a new idea or a new concept, we are now succumbing to the babysitter. You know what I mean? This is the fucking virtual babysitter. And it's so funny how you would think that us being able to cure boredom would be like a good thing, but it's actually a curse. The phone is a blessing, and I am not anti-technology, as you guys know. I'm a fucking tech nerd, dude. But that being said, I understand that it is a double-edged sword, and with all this great power and information comes great responsibility with it. We do have to be a little bit more responsible with our time. But how can we be responsible with our time when the apps are literally designed to steal your attention? They are literally designed to, when you're not using them, to alert you, to bring you back in, because your attention is currency. Your attention is money to them. It is advertiser money. All these social media platforms are free because you are the product. And I know that people know this. This is not new information. But when you think about how our entire world is designed with algorithms that all have their own selfish interests, like stealing your attention for ad revenue for whatever company that app is providing, you know, you're competing with a bunch of forces that are not necessarily aligned, right? YouTube is not speaking with Facebook directly. Sometimes the cookies are, sometimes the ad sharing can be, right? But that's not like Facebook saying, okay, YouTube, I'll let you have Kevin for 30 minutes and then you got to send him over to me. It's not like that. They're all competing for your attention all the time. And so sometimes the only way for us to really break free from the phones is to use the built-in screen time feature, which for iOS users, I'm sure Android probably is the same thing, but for iOS users, you know, it lets you know you can like lock yourself out of apps for after a period of time if you've hit the limit. I found that when I did that, I ended up disabling it, and so obviously it didn't work for me. I'm too socially conditioned. But even just setting the phone aside, not having it in the same room as you, I know is a trick that a lot of people do. And it is effective. It's been proven to be effective that if a phone is literally not in the same room as you when you're doing work, you are more likely to stay on task. And that tells us that, we basically have our little dopamine hits in our pockets at any given time. And so anytime you're bored or you're distressed or whatever, we can just hide away in the phones instead of confronting the feelings and confronting the reasons why we might be feeling that. And when you don't pay attention to your emotions and you don't pay attention to where your mental state is at, it can degrade really quickly. And you then, because you're not aware of it, you then lose the source of where this degradation's coming from. And so the longer you spend in your phone not paying attention to how you're feeling, the more disconnected you become with your spirit and your body and your mind. And I found that during this pandemic, instead of using that time to be creative, which, by the way, you did not have to do. This is a traumatizing thing, and there is no reason why you needed to be productive at all during this horrific experience that we've all gone through collectively as a globe. So this is by no means a shame on anyone who was not productive, because I was not one of them, right? I was not a productive person during the pandemic. But in that time, I grew disconnected from my mind, I grew disconnected from my body, and I grew disconnected from my spirit. I felt disconnected from everything. I was disconnected from my friends, like physically. I literally was not able to be near them. And I was disconnected from, whatever I believe my purpose to be. And I'm a big believer in that you create your own purpose, and that there are some things that I think you are inherently born to do, assuming you go all in with that, right? You have to go all in on the thing that you kind of know that you're born for. And sometimes you don't know what that is for a long time. But when you do figure out whatever that thing is that really scratches the itch, that really feeds your soul, you have to go into it. And that doesn't mean you have to make your whole life around it, because not everybody is destined to work a job that is perfectly in line with their soul, right? This system is not designed that way. Unfortunately, our system is kind of shitty and is designed to just squeeze productivity out of workers and exploit them for profit. So we already know that that's an inherent flaw of the system. The system is never going to allow you to just blindly do what you love and make all the money. Like, that works for some people, and some people will be able to do that. But the reality is not everyone's going to be able to do that. So what can you do in the time that you do have that is not tied to your work, which is providing you sustenance and food and housing and shelter? What can you do with that time that you have that you can actually spend on what feeds your soul? So for some people, feeding the soul is going to be a physical exercise of some kind. For some people, it's going to be painting and art. For some people, it might be math and science, right? For some people, it might be astronomy. For some people, it might be cosplay. You know what I mean? Whatever your thing is, nothing is too small or insignificant. If it feeds your soul and it makes you feel good, then it is by no means a waste of time. And in fact, it is actually a perfect use of your time if you personally get a lot of joy out of that thing. So I want to encourage people to do the thing that you really enjoy in the time that you do have. And if there is a possibility to make it, a career, then do it. If you can, if you think it's feasible and you think that there's a way that you can do it. And that doesn't mean you need to know everything all at once or in the beginning. But if you have that feeling of like, there might be some viability as a career here. And with certain talents, there is. And with certain talents, it's like not only is there viability, but it's actually really plausible and possible, where maybe it's not as high competition as trying to be a rapper or a singer or whatever. Like, obviously that competition's crazy, right? The odds of you breaking free, it's very slim. It's not that it's impossible, and if you meet the right people, whatever, of course you can do it. But, maybe that's a little more improbable than somebody who maybe is like a really good engineer, right? And there's a lot of jobs out there that somebody could go do that thing and become the Michael Jordan of engineering. So for certain people, it's like your skills and what you're passionate about might be perfect for you to make a career out of. But even if it isn't, it doesn't need to be something that you need to make money off of. Capitalism has us thinking that everything needs to be monetized. It doesn't. Sometimes you need to do things for the feeding of the soul, for the just the fun of it. And there's nothing wrong with doing something for the fun of it. There's nothing wrong with doing something because you love doing it. That's, I mean, fuck, that should be the point of doing anything. You know, we all have to do things we don't like doing. Okay. That's fine. I accept that. That is a reality of living as a human being in this system for sure. And probably in any system, there's always going to be stuff we have to do that we don't really want to do, but we have to do it in order to achieve whatever we want to achieve. And that is fine. But we don't need to make every aspect of our life like that. We don't need to make every aspect of our life a thing that we do because we have to. Like, there's so many times where we end up sacrificing our time to the phone, honestly, or to Netflix or whatever. And it's not that you know, watch TV shows, enjoy them. That's what they're there for. And if that helped you get through the pandemic, by all means. Like, I watched a bunch of shows and movies in that time as well. I played a lot of video games. Get lost in those things. That's great. But don't lose too much time in just those things. You know, definitely try to diversify whatever you're doing so that at least some of those things are more active forms of entertainment rather than passive. Passive entertainment is totally fine and is by all means do it. But make sure that there's some active elements to what you do with your free time so that you're learning something, whether it's about yourself or about the skill or about the art that you're into or, you know, whatever that hobby is. Just make sure that you spend that time there, because you'd be surprised what kind of lessons you can learn in a very specifically applied scenario. You know, if you're doing something, and I'll give an easy example, if you're doing like art, for example, and you're learning how to draw or how to paint, in that process of learning how to draw, how to paint, you're learning a lot about life. You're learning a lot of general lessons that you can apply to pretty much anything. And that comes from having a discipline and a focus and an attention that you're bringing towards a very specific action or subject. And having that specific intention tied to a specific action is going to allow your mind to focus and narrow it down to learning a general purpose lesson. And it could be a lesson about determination. It could be a lesson about perseverance. It could be a lesson about repetition. It could be a lesson as simple as just understanding composition in your art, right? Coming up with a nice composition for whatever you're drawing. But those lessons, they translate. And the things that you learn about yourself in the process of pushing yourself and learning these new things, it's so invaluable. And that is something that I learn when I do these podcasts. I learn things about myself in the process of talking to you. I'm not an expert, dude. I'm fucking learning right along the way with all of you. I'm a regular person who has his own flaws and insecurities and mistakes, and I'm always trying to learn and be better. I mean, when I think back to some of the podcasts that I've done in the past, I've had some reactionary takes that now I don't think I would have those takes, right? But and maybe I disagree with some of the things that I said, especially on social justice warrior stuff. It's like, do I think some of those fringe people are annoying? Like, yes, I do. That hasn't changed. But what I think I'm more understanding of is, like, I now understand pronouns, and I can understand, like, the people just want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to feel as they do around other people, and they want that acceptance. And I think to give somebody the courtesy of calling them by their proper pronoun is like the respectful, obvious human thing to do. And you're kind of an asshole if you don't respect that. If somebody says, hey, call me they, them, then call them they, them, dude. It's not that fucking hard. And if you mess up, that's okay. As long as they know that you didn't, like, purposefully misgender them, like, dude, they understand it's weird for you to learn it at first. They're going to give you a pass as long as they can tell that the intent for them to be seen is there. And so there are certain things that I probably said on the podcast in the past that were more reactionary, more, I don't want to say anti-social justice warrior, because I don't feel like I was ever super anti-super justice warrior, but super social justice warrior, super justice warrior too, man. It's like the next level. But that being said, you know, those are some things that I've evolved and I've grown. And I like to think in the last several years, like, you know, there are a lot of things that I probably said in the past that I completely disagree with that I've grown from. And luckily, not everything's recorded on the internet, other than my podcast. But, you know, not everything I've ever said in the world has been recorded on the internet. And so I'm able to learn and grow from it. And I don't need to be reminded of it every time that I've made a mistake, you know. And I think that that's not useful. I think it's important to call out people when they make mistakes. and to correct them. But I don't think it's important to keep harping on it when they've demonstrated a clear evolution. Now, if somebody makes a mistake, apologizes for it, and then continues to make the mistake over and over and over again and shows a repeated pattern of behavior, that is a different case, right? Then clearly they haven't learned and they just paid you lip service with the apology. But if somebody does something wrong and they apologize and they've clearly shown that they've really evolved from that point and they're really not demonstrating that same behavior, then to me it's like, okay, can we let things go for some people, and I think being able to forgive and forget is important, not just for the person who maybe made the mistake, but it's also important for us, because when you hold a grudge against somebody, or when you think about someone in an ill way, especially people who you haven't talked to in a while, like, that only hurts you. It's only hurting you on the inside to hold on to those feelings. And when you're holding on to those feelings, that energy is stored in your body in some form or another, whether it's creating cortisol in the brain, which is a stress hormone, which literally makes you feel worse. Or if it's physically, like holding pain in your chest or your, some other physical manifestation of that, because stress does manifest itself in physical ways in our body. It's not just a mental thing that we go through. And so I think it's important for people to learn, forgive, forget, and grow from things. And we need to allow people the grace of growing and learning from those things. And so I feel like I'm in a place right now that I'm coming out of kind of a dark era. I'm coming out of a dark period of my life. And I feel like I'm really growing into the man that I want to be, And it's really cool, and I'm proud of myself, and it's cool to say that out loud because, even though I still get frustrated with myself and I still need to work on my inner voice not being so harsh and being such a critic, I do feel like I'm recognizing it and being mindful again. I've been meditating more again. I'm still not regular like I used to fucking meditate every day. I'm still not at that level anymore, but I am meditating a lot more, and I've meditated a lot more, at least, 3 or 4 days a week now. And so even just to get back to that level and to kind of come back into my own, it's part of the ebbs and flows of life. And you're obviously not going to have smooth sailing all the time. And so I'm now at a point where I'm coming out of a pretty decent low, being COVID and the things that came from COVID, to now, I wouldn't say this is a super high or anything, but I would say that I'm rising. I don't think I peaked at the place that I'm at. And I think I'm starting to embrace and appreciate my artistry for what it is, and trying to find my voice again. And so I think that's partly why I'm bringing the podcast back with some degree of regularity. Maybe I'll bring guests on again, but as of right now, I'm not like equipped in the same way that I was, and I don't know how much of a fan I am of virtual podcasts, although I'm open to it. But for the moment, I think that the value for me in the podcast can be what I'm doing here. And the value that I think I'm going to find in some of the video content that I'm making. I don't know if you guys saw my review of a lens. I'm going to do some gear stuff, and I'll do some gaming stuff. And I want to do some cinematic shit and maybe some stuff kind of similar to what I'm talking about on the podcast, and turning that into some sort of more story driven video stuff, documentary style, I think, rather than fictional, because I don't have any actors, and it requires too much time, resources, and planning for me to try to have actors and coordinate with other people. But for me to at least be able to shoot some of my own stuff and really think about how I want to best convey something that maybe sounded good on a podcast, but could be sold in a better way, so to speak. The message could be clearer through a more visual presentation. So we'll see. We'll see what comes from my imagination. I'm not going to put any pressure on it. I know that those are some general ideas that I have. So you'll see as things evolve. I'm trying to get over needing to plan everything. So part of that journey is going to be me just failing my way through the first several videos. But that being said, I try to keep these solo podcasts to 30 minutes now, partly because of my camera recording limitation, but also partly because I think I'm more concise if I force myself within a very specific time limit, and I try to get my point across in as little words as possible with as little bit of rambling as possible. So thank you all for listening. I appreciate you all. Peace out, heavy mommies. Follow, like, subscribe, all that stuff. All the links are in the descriptions of all the podcast episodes on wherever you find podcasts, as well as in the YouTube channel. And then, of course, in my Instagram bio, I have links to my website, YouTube, etc., etc. So thank you again for listening. I appreciate you all. Peace out, heavy mommies.